Good evening. My name is Allison Kaplan. I'm Director of Education at the National First Ladies Library at the National First Ladies Historic Site in Canton, Ohio. And I want to wish everyone a happy spring and thank you for joining us tonight. We have had an overwhelming response above and beyond what we can comfortably accommodate in our Zoom format this evening. So I want to welcome anyone who is here with us on Zoom, anyone who's watching on Facebook, or anyone who is screening on YouTube after the fact. We are delighted to have you here tonight. And whether you are in Ohio and nearby and able to visit us, or whether you are somewhere else around the world, we would like to, hopefully you can see me, thumbs up if you can, welcome you. So I wanted to tell you about a few upcoming programs here at the National First Ladies Library before we get started. We have a monthly STEM box for any young students who are excited and interested in learning about careers in science. The cost of that activity is $15 and it ships directly to you. This month we're featuring Grace Hopper and we have a really cool unplugged computer coding activity as well as an opportunity to make your own computer bug. Um, we have a monthly legacy lecture, and this next month should be really exciting. We are featuring Karen Dunak of Muskingum University on April 7th, and she will be speaking about Jacqueline Kennedy and presidential image making. So Jacqueline Kennedy in the first 100 days of the Kennedy administration. We are super excited about that one. Any of these programs you can access via our Facebook page or our Eventbrite or by going to firstladies.org. So hopefully you can join us there. We also have a monthly film discussion and a quarterly book club. So April 13th, you can screen online before the fact if you're local through Stark Library, the film I Know a Woman Like That, and join us for a discussion on April 13th. And then in May, we will be featuring Amy Bloom's White Houses, a fictional book about Eleanor Roosevelt on May 24th for discussion. So if you love to chat about all things First Ladies, please join us for one of those programs. And then we also have a regular curator series where we get to connect with sometimes our curator who shows us objects and behind the scenes items. And sometimes we are traveling to other places. So on April 15th, we will be at the Peabody Essex Museum talking to the curator of Made It, the women who revolutionized fashion, with a special emphasis hopefully on Elizabeth Keckley. So we're super excited to learn more about that exhibition. It should be really fun. And as my cat is joining me in the background, I figure it is time to turn things over to tonight's festivities. So our First Ladies Night program usually features different crafts that are First Lady inspired. We've done everything from Martha Washington cross stitch to calligraphy, to gingerbread inspired by First Lady White House Christmas decorations. So we're super excited to have a real White House professional here tonight. Tonight we will be joined by Pat Blair, who served for 12 and a half years, 3 presidential administrations as chief calligrapher at the White House. She directed the production of invitation and menu design for all official and social presidential events, calligraphy of place cards, invitations, and menus, certificate and resolution design, as well as production of programs and tour books. Prior to that, she served as the president of Washington's Calligraphers Guild, chaired the Graceful Envelope Contest sponsored by the U.S. Postal Service, and served as co-director of the International Lettering Conference, Letter Forum. Her work has been published in the Calligrapher's Engagement Calendar, Letter Arts Review, Top 100 New York Calligraphers, Grolier Club Calligraphy Revival, and Martha Stewart Weddings, among others. She's taught at the Loudon Academy of Arts in Virginia and has been on the faculty of over 10 international calligraphy conferences. She has been awarded the title Master Penman by the International Association of Master Penmen, Engrossers, and Teachers of Handwriting. So we are so excited to be joined by Pat Blair this evening, and she's going to give us a little background on her experiences at the White House and also do a demo. So as Pat is joining us, if you have questions throughout the evening, please enter them into the chat and we will get to them as our talk progresses. So I want to welcome Pat and turn things over to her.
Hello. Can you see me? Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to come to speak to you. I have been very fortunate to work with some outstanding people in 3 administrations. I started in 2006 as director of the calligraphy office, and I mean, it's just been a wonderful opportunity to get some experience with working on designs, working on calligraphy, working on all the accompanying invitations, menus that go with it, but also having a chance to be in a position to enable these events to become as beautiful and outstanding as they were. And in doing that, I worked with several outstanding first ladies. They, without exception, were wonderful to work with. Their staffs were great. It was stressful at times. There were many deadlines. Nothing could ever be late. We had to have everything perfect, but we were rewarded in knowing that all of our work was presented before heads of state, kings, presidents, prime ministers all over the world. I have some terrific memories. So tonight I thought I would give you a little bit of a glimpse into what we did, how we worked with the administrations, with the first ladies, with their staffs to put on some beautiful events. So we're going to start with a little slideshow, some images of these events, how we contributed to them, how we talked to the First Lady about her requirements, her desires, her impressions of how she wanted this event to go. And then I'm going to show you some actual work that we did and give you a little demonstration of the calligraphy that was part of it. We, like Allison said, we handled all the menus, invitations, place cards, but also did programs, painted signs. We did typesetting, graphic art, all tied up into one office. So we were a busy lot. So I think, let me switch over my screen and see, hopefully this will go well. Okay, and now we go full screen. There we go. I hope that is nice and clear for you. So we're going to start, let me just advance this to one slide here. So first thing I want to just share with you what goes into creating these beautiful events. What you see right now is an image of the place setting for the president. This was when the Queen came to visit in 2007. It was my first white tie dinner that I ever worked on, and it was quite an experience. Every single detail was thought through, between the choice of the linens, the choice of the china, the choice of the flowers. The roses that you see are white Tudor roses in honor of the Queen. The choice of lettering style was all go to the feel of the event. Obviously, this was quite elegant, quite dressy, so we wanted something that kind of spoke to that. The menu that you see on the plate was done in the calligraphy office, including that little piece of artwork that you see on it. The china is the Clinton china. Um, we had access to many administrations' china patterns. They are part of the Historical Association, so as such, can be used at any number of events. And the choice of the china was pretty much up to the First Lady and the design staff. There was no meaning behind which service was used other than how it fits into the decor. They're pretty much used across the board. This is an example of um, a typical, well, actually not so typical. This was the invitation that we penned for the Queen. All of the lettering was done by hand. And as a nod to the history of a White House invitation, the space is left blank so that the guest's name can be added in. If you go back years to when the White House first was starting to have events extending invitations, and there was usually the secretary of the First Lady was the person who extended the invitations, and they would all be handwritten with the guest's name included in the invitation. So this is kind of a nod to that time period. And the calligrapher who did the lettering on the invitation would then, once they were engraved, fill in the name of the guest. So upon first glance, it would look like the whole invitation was written just for the guest recipient. This is the menu that went with the Queen's event. This was the menu that was on the china that you saw 2 slides ago. And we try to always incorporate a little bit of illustration just to tie everything together when it was on the tablescape. And here you can see again that little spray of Tudor roses. The illustration would have been done first with a black outline, and the lettering was done in black. That then would get sent to the printer, printed in black. We would then receive it and hand paint all of the detail, all of the illustrations on all the menus. So you see the little watercolor of the green leaves, a little bit of gold, and the white was actually built up acrylic, so it had a little bit of a 3-dimension to it. This is what the state dining room looks like for a state dinner. And state dinners were especially busy because, again, being we were the host for a head of state and their delegation and their guests, we wanted to put America's best foot forward. So everything was thought through. The First Lady had a great deal of influence and input into how she wanted the event to be handled. In this case, I would sit with her and we would talk about the look that she wanted for the menus and the place cards and the programs. That was our part of the event. And usually it started with the choice of the linens. That was kind of the springboard for all of the designs. In this case, this was Mrs. Obama. She chose this beautiful white linen with the outline kind of like a daisy-like pattern. And that was our inspiration. So the calligraphy was done in gray to bring in the gray and the yellow palette. And I believe the next slide has, yeah, and that would be the program slash menu that we designed to go with the tablescape. So as you can see, the writing was done in gray, and then we brought in that very casual, that really pretty springy floral design. We picked that up from the tablecloth and put it on the menu as well, with the gray outline with that beautiful mazy yellow petal. This is me. Part of our job was not only writing all the place cards, but setting up the place cards. So usually about an hour and a half before the event, we would take all the place cards down. The tables obviously had to be all set. Everything was ready. The place cards were really the last thing to be set up. And then once we did that, we walked through the whole room to make sure all of the guests were seated properly. The guest list, the seating were all very, very carefully thought through by the First Lady and her staff. Here's another image of another state dinner. I believe this was Canada, but I'm not 100% sure. But here again, the color palette was all chosen before any of the decisions about the menus or programs or place cards were done. So in this case, we were working with these beautiful florals, the rust color, the peach, those beautiful gray greens was our inspiration. We were also told about any other accompanying features. In this case, we knew of the terracotta plates. So we decided to continue with those beautiful tones and chose this kind of a russet brick red color stock for the covers of the programs, and then had leaves embossed in the cover. You can see a nice view of it right there where the light's kind of showing up that relief. But there was no color in that. It was all blind embossed, but it gave a beautiful texture, very subtle. Most of the events that were done of this kind of formality, it was always subtlety that we were after, understated elegance. We chose, all of these things just very, very carefully. Here's another shot of another state dinner. This one was during the Trump administration. It was when the French president came over for a dinner. The menu, again, we did in our office, black lettering. And then you see that little gold fleur-de-lis. Mrs. Trump, again, wanted everything very, very stately. She had quite a beautiful sense of color, and she had a lot of grace and always very interested in the in her guests. So in keeping with that kind of tone, we thought, well, we're going to keep this as simple and elegant as we can. So we just chose a very simple image of the fleur-de-lis, but instead of hand painting it, we had it engraved in gold. So you had that beautiful relief of the gold image, on a very classic copper plate type of lettering. And that combined with the gold of the china, it was stunning. It was just stunning. Another image, I believe this was Japan. there was the decision to do peonies as a focal floral arrangement. And the flower shop had chosen these beautiful, bright pink fuchsia peonies, gorgeous blossoms. And we just took it from there with our choice of that beautiful rose color for the program. So all of this was done generally about 2 months before. I had a lot of opportunities to work with the first ladies on specific projects, and this was one of my favorites. Mrs. Bush was a wonderful librarian, very, very interested in books and reading and literacy. And every year she would hold a library event. This was the invitation for one of the years. She had asked me if we could do an image, a watercolor image of a scene from the residence. The residence were the floors above the public space in the White House where the president and family lived. And so this was a watercolor that I had done. She sent down several images, several photographs of different scenes from the residence. And this one was of a little sitting area in front of a bookcase. So we both thought this would be a really nice scene to be on the cover of her event. So the original watercolor was pretty large. I think if I remember right, it was about 10 by 15 or 14. And I used, again, the image that she had sent the photograph to do the painting. We had a really very, very sophisticated printer, a color laser printer. So we were actually able to print these in our office, which saved a lot of time. But one of my favorites, it really came out well. For all of the events, we again had multiple conversations about the look of these items. This was a smaller event, a luncheon for the spouses of the cabinet. It was done in most likely either the blue room or the red room. There were smaller rooms in the White House where smaller events like this were held. And I remember this one in particular because the flowers that were used in the center of the table were chosen first. They have to be ordered. So that was one of the first decisions that had to be made. But it was always a nice idea to bring to kind of reference the flowers that were in the center of the table. And so in this case, when I went down to the flower shop to see what they were doing, they had these gorgeous, beautiful jewel tone flowers. And we thought, oh, that would make a lovely focal point on the menu. And I remember coming back up to my desk, very, very happy because I had this beautiful bouquet in front of me on my desk, and that's what I drew to include on the menu. You can see those beautiful, it was like a yellow rose, and I believe there was like a dahlia, kind of a purple and red dahlia, just beautiful colors. But the bonus of that was I got to enjoy those flowers for a few days. Another event, this, I believe, was during the Bush administration. It was when the president of France came over for a visit, and there was a special luncheon being held at Mount Vernon, which is a little bit south of Washington, D.C. And so being Mount Vernon is a very, very colonial era building and former home, the First Lady wanted to reference that time period in the menu. So I worked up some ideas for lettering, and this was one that was actually based on the handwriting of President Lincoln. If you look at his handwriting, you see the various kind of idiosyncrasies that he had in his writing, and incorporating those into the lettering just kind of gave that feel of a different time period. So this one was a lot of fun. The image of Mount Vernon was done in pen and ink and then sent to the printer so that the only the black was printed. Then we got it back and added the watercolor um, trees and fill in of the building's roof. That same lettering was done for a few different events. This one actually was for Lincoln's birthday, so that was perfect a reference. Again, that same kind of um, colonial, kind of handwriting-ish calligraphy to tie in with that. We did a lot of illustrations, and always to tie in with the theme or the guest of an event. This was a dinner for the British ambassador, and so one of the Rick on our staff did that beautiful pen and ink illustration of Big Ben. He would do all of the lettering first, and then the illustration, all of that was done in black. That was then sent to the printer. He got it back and he did that very beautiful watercolor wash on the illustration. So each of these little menus was really a little work of art. They were original watercolors. And of course, all of the lettering was done, all of the calligraphy was done by hand. This, another very special event that I worked on, and this was for the Historical Association. It was a dinner, a small dinner though. There were, I think, maybe only 12, 12 guests at this dinner. It was held in the Old Family Dining Room, which is a small room off the usher's office on the main floor of the White House. And the reason that this in particular was so interesting to work on is that the china that you see on the table was the china that was used by President Lincoln. Obviously, very few pieces of that remain, and the ones that do remain are priceless. So the fact that they were able to have dinner on this beautiful china was quite a treat. The glassware is from the World's Fair, but quite a very very lovely evening for them. The little illustration that you see on the menu is actually a pen and ink drawing of some of the relief that's in the interior of the White House. So tying everything together was always paramount in all of these decisions. Everything was referenced and thought through. This was an interesting project. I worked with Mrs. Trump on this. This was the first black tie dinner, I believe, in their administration. And it was dinner in honor of the governors. And definitely it's an annual tradition that it's held early on in the year. And she wanted to reference again all of the states. So what we did was choose the state flower of all of the states and incorporate them into this menu. It was a booklet. You can see how it's open, and but the flyleaf of the booklet were all of these flowers. And we had a heck of a time because there's really no one resource where you can go and all of these flowers will be right there for you to use. We had to research them. We have to find them on the internet, Google state flower of so-and-so, and then pull them off and take those images, which were all in different colors, and digitally remove the color, make them all grayscale. But then, not wanting them to be gray, we then had to add color to those images. So they'd be monochromatic, but all in this beautiful sage green color. But it's that was also a fun project, if not a late night project, trying to find all of those images. This always brings to mind Mrs. Bush standing in the office. She would come by and say hi. She very, very friendly, and she knew us all by name. And I was decorating these Easter eggs. So to do something like this, the lettering was all done by hand in an italic form, and then that would be scanned in. But the Easter eggs were hand painted. So I remember distinctly having all these beautiful Easter colors spread out on my desk, painting Easter eggs. And I thought, oh, this is a lot of fun. And then scanning them into the computer to do the layout and placing them in a way that would enhance the illustration. Excuse me. This sketch was done by Mrs. Trump. So many times the first ladies would have specific ideas on what their vision was for certain events, usually the larger events. The smaller events, we worked with the staff, but some of the larger events, the first ladies did have a little bit more, maybe more ideas as to what they were thinking. So she had a vision in mind, and this was the sketch that we got from her. This was for the congressional picnic. And this is the type of notes that we would many times get, just we'd have a little bit of a conversation about the look, maybe a color scheme and that type of thing. And then we'd get some accompanying notes to go with it. Basically, she was looking at a scene of Central Park with the words on the cover, "Join us for a picnic in the park," which was the theme of the picnic. That's the kind of thing sometimes that we received. We then turned it into this. We have the scene of Central Park. You can see the skyline of the buildings in the background. There's an iconic stone bridge in the park. That's what we incorporated. And then the little elements in the park, the tree, the bench, the picnic basket. But that's kind of how it morphed. And sometimes it's not an easy transition. Sometimes, multiple designs are submitted for the First Lady's approval. And a lot of times it's a combination of ideas, but usually it was always helpful for the staff or the First Lady to actually see images. Right away they would say, yes, that's exactly what I want. Or, well, maybe I like this color palette, but maybe I like this lettering. So it was always helpful for us to give them as much information as we could so that they would right off the bat be able to say, okay, you nailed it, or let's do this, but let's tweak it a little bit more. This was the president's first Christmas card, President Obama, and the direction I received for that was they just wanted to look very stately, very elegant, very White House, and there was no calligraphy involved. There's not always calligraphy involved in every project that we did. Sometimes a font is more appropriate. In this case, that's what they chose, just kind of like a very traditional black letter font. But the wreath on the cover was all hand done. And what they are, it's a wreath made up of leaves. On the top of the door in the north portico is a beautiful relief of these oak leaves. So it was my job to come up with a design using the oak leaves. And I took that image and made a black and white illustration from those leaves, put them together. This is what then I sent to the printer. The printer then made a plate of this to engrave the gold image. So that's how that kind of evolved. And this this dinner service was one from President Madison. So Mrs. Bush came in one day and she said she would like some help creating her presidential China service. And the pattern that she liked was the one that President Madison had used. And she had sent her idea to Lennox, and Lennox sent back a perfectly good interpretation of it, but the interpretation was done by computer. And so when she got it back, she thought, it's just too sterile. There's no life behind it. It's too perfect. And so she said to me, she says, is there a way? Because if you notice the pattern on that china, how it's not perfect, but yet it's skillfully done. But it's definitely you could see that it's hand rendered. So she said to me, can you help me? Can you emulate this basket weave pattern? So I said, sure. And I'm just trying to think, how the heck are we going to do this? But it took about a year and a half to come up with a design. And basically, the hardest part was deciding, how many lines that to do, what's the angle of the lines. Every single time we made a change in either the curvature or the number of lines, we created a different pattern. So it took some finagling, but this was the final design. The basket weave was done first in pencil, and I used a red solo cup to as a template to create that curve, and then basically traced in pencil with the red solo cup. But once it was done in pencil, I then took a pointed pen and kind of followed over the pencil line. So I had the guide behind it, but it was definitely not perfect because it was technically, done by hand. But that's exactly what she wanted. She saw the result of that as being eh, not kind of imperfectly perfect, or perfectly imperfect, however you want to say it. You could see that it was rendered by hand. This was the way the china looked in production. This was my table, and once the pattern, you can see the china there, the pattern was set, but now we're working on the image of the eagle on the inside. And all of this was done with Mrs. Bush. And like I said, it took about an hour, a year and a half, but it was quite a project. I'll never forget it. This was the final piece, the final dinner service, and this was the little cup that goes with it. So you can see that green, that was all done by hand. And every single piece had to have a different pattern and a different size, because of course all the pieces were different sizes. So once we were able to determine, how many of those lines and the kind of curve, we kind of had to go back to square one for all the rest of the pieces so that the pattern would be similar. And that's the china that in use. It was so Mrs. Bush did not, I don't think she even got a chance to enjoy the china during her administration, but it was completed for the next administration. So there you can see it being used for a luncheon that Mrs. Obama hosted. And as luck would have it, I was very, very honored that I was a guest at that luncheon. This is actually my daughter. It was a Mother's Day tea, and Mrs. Obama invited me to be a guest, which was quite an honor, quite an honor. And I could bring a guest, so I chose my daughter. So we both went to luncheon at the White House. And I also did the calligraphy for the menu and the place card. So that was quite a memory. And finally, I always have to put this shot in these slide presentations. This is the view out my window. We were in the East Wing. We faced northeast. So if you look out my window, this is what I would see, which is the Treasury building. And the one day I happened to look out and I saw this beautiful rainbow with the Treasury building right at its base. So I thought, oh, I have to take this picture. Everyone's thinking, where is this, all of this gold? Well, it's right there in the Treasury building. And it's just kind of one of my favorite shots. So, all right, let me turn the presentation off and, okay, shot. Okay, let's change views. So I hope that was, my hope was to give you a little glimpse into what our role was in these events and kind of the thinking, the thought processes that went into planning them. There, as you can see, there was a lot of details to take into consideration. Okay, let's see. I see some questions that came through. So
You want to take questions as you're setting up your screen? Or do you
yeah,
want to?
you think so, Allison? So we could do that. The other things that I want to show you is some of the artwork that we used for those pieces. So maybe before I do that, might be a nice little segue.
We could do just a few. We have so many questions. People are having a wonderful time here tonight. This has been amazing. I don't know if it's that I've been quarantined for so long that seeing these beautiful flowers and amazing events and calligraphy has been like, I'm just salivating here.
I know we
So
want to be there.
the main question we wanted to start with was, what was your background? Did you go to art school? I know that you were interested in calligraphy from a young age. How did you end up in this position?
Well, I'd been freelancing in calligraphy for many years. I started in the 80s. I had a business set up working from home, and um, life circumstances brought me to Washington in the mid 90s, but I had kept up my freelance business. And being in Washington, I started connecting with all the folks down there who were obviously having events galore. And one thing led to another. You just start to know people. I started working for Vice President Cheney when he was in office as a contractor. He didn't have a full-time calligrapher, but as a contractor. And so got to know his staff. But at the same time, I worked with both sides. You know, everyone has parties. So I got to know a lot of people. And then during the first year of the Bush administration, the social secretary for the vice president was brought over to the White House as social secretary. And then a year later, a spot opened up in the director of the calligraphy office. So I had already been working for her or with her for about 5 years. So she called me that day and she said, there's a spot open. And so just being in the right spot at the right time. But um, after about 10 years, that is, working with everybody. So I paid my dues. I knew the protocol. I knew all of that goes with working at the White House.
One quick question, and then I'll let you turn on your screen so we can see some more of your amazing work and get the demo. How has technology changed your job over the you actually started during the Clinton administration.
Mhm.
So going into Trump, there's a huge stretch in technology and what was possible. And I wonder how that impacted the work that you did.
It impacted it tremendously because when I first started, when I was there part-time for Clinton, there was everything was hand done. In fact, what I'm going to show you in a few minutes was how we worked. But instead of using a computer to complete the work and the layouts, it was done by hand. Over the course of those 15 years, the handwork then was replaced by the computer. The process was the same, but the tool had changed. And it was much easier for a number of reasons. One, it was easier to do layout and the fine tuning of the lettering on the computer, but also when it comes to bringing it to the printer, we used to have to go and send a courier or literally bring it over to the printer ourselves. When it was digital, we could just email it to him. So it was like night and day. In that short span of time, everything had changed tremendously.
I will get out of the way and encourage people to keep sending questions and well pop back on and do questions at the end. Thank you so much.
Sure. So I just thought it would be fun, since we're talking about calligraphy, to show you just a few short examples of the work as it's done. So I'm going to switch my camera to um, my desk camera. And let me get that in position. So the first thing I'm going to show you is, and I know I have to always watch there it goes. So this was the invitation that you saw on the screen earlier. This is the one for the president when he entertained Queen Elizabeth. This, I think, it got the most press from us, that's for sure. It was actually on the cover of the New York Times. I had press come into the office to talk about it. It was not every day that the Queen comes for a visit to the White House, so it was quite historic. But this was the invitation, the actual invitation. It was engraved. But I brought with me. I also have here the artwork, the calligraphy. This is how it began. This is an actual piece. The size of this paper is 14 by 16, so we work very, very large. But this is my work. I'm basically trying to test the lettering style. It hasn't been decided if this is going to be the the type of lettering. The name of the lettering style is copperplate. It was actually based on a European tradition hand that was done with a pointed pen. And I'm going to show you a little illustration of this in just a few minutes. But this is the tool that's used to write in this way. But this is how it starts. Just kind of warming up, practicing. The menu is here. So the menu that you saw earlier, which had the white Tudor roses as part of it, this is the calligraphy for that menu. Again, written very, very large. You can see, maybe it's hard to see the size of it, but again, a classic, what's called a copperplate style of writing. We were looking for something very elegant, very dressy, and this is what what we chose. There was a lot of text on this menu. So we, but it has to be written. The next step then would be to scan this writing at a very, very high resolution, scan it in black and white. We then take that scan, excuse me, into the computer where we lay it out on the computer. So the process of that is pretty much the same. In when I first started in the mid 90s, the way I would do it is I would pick a line and I basically cut this line out and then paste it on a separate sheet of paper. Each of these lines would be cut and pasted until the whole menu was pasted in its completion. That then would be cleaned up, and by cleaned up I mean if there were any little wobbles or blobs of ink that remained on the lettering, we would go in with a paintbrush and white out and clean it up and then ink over it with black. So that was the process. That then was sent to the printer. Now, similar process, except it's done by computer. So now the same thing though, the line is selected, except instead of pencil and scissor now, it's done on the computer. And then that line is brought over to, again, a base page and laid out. I have a few other things to show you, and then we can maybe go over some questions. But I mentioned before about how much thought goes into every part of these dinners, and this is how we would try to help the First Lady decide on the type of lettering that she wants. These are all forms of copperplate still, but if you notice, there are certain differences. This is a little heavier. This is a little more compact. The capital letters are different. Various differences that will make a difference in the overall look. So the very first step is we would submit these, we'd give these to the First Lady and she would go through them. And then we would get a note back, okay, this is the lettering I chose, let's proceed with this one. But this is the type of thing that we would prepare so that they would have a visual of the final result. It would be really difficult to explain what this looks like. And then she would select one. And then when she finally did, we would go from there with the actual writing like you just saw of the whole invitation. Here's another sheet of writing. Another, I believe this one, yes, this one, the menu was on the slide presentation. But here again, this is the original lettering for the invitation of this state dinner. And this is what it looks like. Again, very, very large. But you can see the benefit of working with the computer. So where there's a mistake, the E was written instead of a U, you don't have to rewrite the whole thing. You can just do a little cross out of it. When this is then brought into the computer, this is an easy fix just by digitally erasing these pixels and digitally connecting those two parts of the word. So in that way, the digital world has made a huge, huge difference. And then again, any spacing issues can be repaired on the computer. And this was the final invitation as it looked after that was scanned and laid out. That was the final. This is a Xerox copy of it. The original, there would be a gold engraved presidential seal. Actually, that's the coat of arms. The gold presidential coat of arms on the top, and this lettering would be engraved in black. And then the very last thing I want to show you, we also did illustrations. Mrs. Obama, as you know, had an initiative of healthy eating. She brought the garden back to life. And so she would have a lot of accompanying press. She was making the circuit of television shows so that she could talk about her initiative. And she asked us to create a seed packet. And so we did all of this in-house. We did the watercolor. This was my work. I did the watercolor of all the vegetables and the calligraphy and the illustration, scanned all of those components in, and then laid them out on the computer. I only did one pepper. It's the same illustration, just arranged differently on the piece. We would then print it in-house and cut it up. And if you look on the back, you can see how this is just a big seed packet. And she brought this around with her when she went to talk about the garden initiative. And this was a photo of it in her basket. This, I think, she brought when she went to Good Morning America. But there's our little seed packet. So what was fun for me was just, the amount of projects, but the different kinds of projects, it was from invitations to menus to seed packets to China. We never knew what surprises, but I learned so much. That was definitely one of the best things about working on these projects. So let me change cameras again. Okay, there we go. Okay. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a little sense of what goes into creating these invitations and menus. For the state dinners, we had a lot of time because, like I said, there was a lot of give and take about the choices that we made. But some of the events, we had very little time. Many times the president would just decide to have a luncheon the next day, and we would have to create a menu, get it to the printer, and have it ready to go the next day. So sometimes these events were very short fused, but we just learned to do it. We worked under pressure, and after a while, you can kind of do it without stressing too much about it. If there was last minute changes, sometimes the wine wasn't available, we had to do that as well. And luckily our printers were always on board to turn things around as soon as they can. So definitely a team effort, but without fail, we always came through, and every single dinner guest had a beautifully penned menu in front of them. So that was the goal. Allison, did you want to maybe turn it over to questions?
Sure, we have a lot of questions here, so we'll try to get to some of them. And I also want to encourage people to go to Pat's website, patblaircalligraphy.com. If you are interested in learning more about Pat, she offers classes as well as custom calligraphy. So it's a nice way to connect if you have further questions or you're interested in exploring more of her work. We have a lot of questions here. People want to know what kinds of nibs you use for your calligraphy, if they're getting started into calligraphy, what you recommend, how they pursue that as a hobby or a career.
Yeah, let me I can take a few minutes, right, to just go through some of those basics.
Mhm.
Okay, let me switch cameras again because I think I talked about doing that and I let that slip past me. So let me just change cameras and we'll talk about to all aspiring calligraphers or even calligraphers who might not have tried this kind of writing. But as I mentioned before, this is the tool. It's called an oblique holder. And it's designed so that when you press on it, you get a nice heavy line. Let me come up here. So basically, you need an oblique holder. There are multiple nibs around, but if you're a beginner, there's one that's called Hunt 22. If you go to a supplier like John Neal Books or Paper and Ink, these suppliers have these very unique tools. Some of these tools you just can't pick up at the local art and craft store. The nib would be one of them, but a Hunt 22. And for ink, always a nice crisp black ink. The ink that we've used without fail I've used for the past 15 years is this one right here. It's a Sumi ink, so it's beautiful black and crisp. And it's called a Sumi Moon Palace. It's beautiful. That is the ink that was used for all of the work that you saw. The paper is a Canson paper. It's a marker paper, actually. Where are we? The paper takes ink so well. You want a paper that's going to give you a beautiful fine hairline as well as hold its own for those beautiful shades. So this one is highly recommended. Again, this I have been using for years and it has never failed me because so much of our work was done for reproduction. We needed ink and paper and pen nib that are going to give us the best quality letter. This lettering, as I mentioned before, is called copperplate. It comes from a European tradition. And if you noticed the look of it, it's what was used in the Declaration of Independence. The nib will give you a combination of thin, let me just move up a little bit. The nib will give you a combination of thin strokes when you write and pull the pen away from you, but it'll give you thicker strokes when you bring your pen towards you. And it's the pressure on your pen that gives you that beautiful swell. So to do this kind of stroke, you're bringing the pen towards you, pressing, and then when you release the pressure, you get that beautiful fine hairline. That's the combination of the thin and the thick that gives that gorgeous texture. The reason that the pen nib is bent, or it's called an oblique holder, is that you want that tip to be constantly aligned with how the letter is being slanted. In this case, the slant line is coming right down through that stem. And so when you bring your pen down along that line, you'll get that thicker stroke. Calligraphy is basically a set of letters all having the same kind of characteristic. In this case, copperplate is very oval based. All of these shapes are based on an oval. There's a very definite slant. To be specific, it's 55 degrees. And each of these letters has a very particular form. It's done pretty slow, not painfully slow, but slow enough that you can keep a beautiful form behind it, um, uh, so that you have this resulting pattern, of thicks and thins, and this beautiful texture. But that is, and as far as the forms go, as you saw before, there are some standard forms, but just applying a little bit more pressure can give you a little bolder look. A little less pressure can give you a lighter look. And it's these differences that we used to come up with ideas for each of these events. This is the type of thing that we would submit, all of these differences. But yeah, this is basically the very, very tippy point of the top of the iceberg when it comes to calligraphy. But like I said, the goal in calligraphy is beauty. Calligraphy means beautiful writing. It should be something that you enjoy, that the viewer enjoys looking at. Yes, you have to be able to read it. People needed to know what they were eating. People needed to know where they were going for their event and what time to be there. But you also, it had to be something beautiful. And I can't tell you how many times we were told that the invitations were framed. That really said a lot, and meant a lot to us. But yeah, that's kind of the tip of the iceberg, because like I said before, everything was done for reproduction. The black was very important because of the fact that it had to be captured by either a scanner or a photo machine. In our case, we did a high resolution scanner. So when we placed it on the scanning bed, all of those fine hairlines that we took so many pains to make sure that they were beautiful and light, that still had to be captured by the camera of the scanner. And so you want ink and pens and papers to all work together to that end. But if you look up calligraphy supplies, there are some vendors, and there are, oh my gosh, limitless supply, I think, of types to try. But a really good one to start is the Hunt. It's a Hunt 22, and of course, it's called an Oblique Holder because I am sitting comfortably at my desk, and the flange of the pen is placing the nib where I want it to be. I want it to be aligned so that when I place pressure on it, you can see those two tines splitting apart. You want that. That's what gives you that beautiful shade. Were there any other questions, Allison, about any of this type of details?
Let's see. I think some of the questions were about certain fonts, and if there was a preference for a certain type of font in the White House.
Well, not really. The choice of the hand, so in calligraphy terminology, it would be called a hand. And the choice of hand really depended on the type of event that it was. So, because of course there were a lot of dressy, elegant events, the copperplate, which is what I'm doing now, was very popular. However, there were also a lot of events. For instance, when visiting heads of state came, their luncheons were a little bit more business oriented. And so in that case, we tried to choose lettering that would be not quite as, oh gosh, I don't know what you would say, frilly maybe. It's not really a good word, but not as dressy, not as dressy, maybe. I guess that's um, one way to put it. And so the choice would always depend on the type of event. This lettering that we talked about earlier would be fit into that category. This is done with a whole different tool. This lettering was done with a broad edge tool. So the pressure is done not by the thicks and the thins, or the thicks and the thins were done not by the pressure, but by the position of the pen on the page. And so this was a better choice for something like this, to use a light, airy copper plate here. I don't think would have worked. You needed something a little bit bold, and especially because this was going to appear on a TV camera. That's why the colors were so bold, and this needed to be read, by the audience looking on TV. So all of those kind of decisions come into play when deciding on the hand, most definitely. So there were lots and lots of different kind of hands to choose from.
And when you're telling us about sending things to the printer, are you sending them to the Department of Printing and Engraving or?
No. So the Department of Printing and Engraving is in charge of a lot of official documents, a lot of the bills that that the president signs. But our office was mainly doing White House, the social, the ceremonial, official events of the president. And so we needed, well, first of all, we needed a printer local who we could retrieve the work from, and um, also was very speedy. And so we had three, well, actually four printers that we worked with. We did have an in-house printer. The in-house printer, though, was really mainly handling briefs that the president wanted printed, staff Xeroxes, and that type of thing. The um, engraving was done by a local engraver, and he created all of our engraving plates. Our offset printing, which was the printing that was done on the menus, was done by another printer. And finally, we had our own printer. We had a laser printer that was in our office. That was really beautiful, and took care of a lot of our needs in case we didn't either have the time to send it to a printer, or didn't want to go to the expense. And so which one we used really depended on the type of project.
People are asking if you have a favorite project that you worked on and a most challenging project.
Probably probably my favorite project was the China. I was very, very honored to be a part of that project. When you think of the ramifications of that's there forever. And nobody know, it wasn't like So as a staff of the White House, it's nothing that I would ever get credit for. My name's not going to appear anywhere. Um, but I know, and I like to share the story with calligraphers because to them it's intriguing that it was done by hand and just the method of doing it by hand. But I would say that's one of my um, favorite projects. That gosh, there were so many. Um, I do have a nice recollection of setting up a luncheon for the president when the Queen came, and we were upstairs in the yellow Oval Office and setting up for the luncheon. And I happened to glance out the front window, and I looked out, which looked over the lawn, the south lawn, and that's where the arrival ceremonies take place. And I looked at back down, and I saw the two. I saw the president and the queen. I saw their backs were to the window because obviously they're looking out over the crowd. But I looked out and I saw her hat and the president's, the back of the president, and I saw them kind of chuckling. They had a good rapport. And then looking beyond them and seeing the thousands and thousands of people on the South Lawn, and I remember thinking, geez, I mean, there were a few other people in the room, and I said, gee, there's a handful of people right now in the world that are looking at this scene from this vantage point. And I kind of had to pinch myself, like, that's just so unique. That really is a unique experience to be able to say that. I'm just going to switch cameras now so I can look at you. But I mean, there's so many different thoughts like that and yet day to day it was a job. I mean, we had a job to do. You couldn't really sit and say, oh wow, look at this. You couldn't. You were working, and so we just had to deal with so many different people, designers, flower shop, printers, chef, the kitchen. We had to call down to the kitchen before we did a menu to make sure that everything was correct. Many times we had to check spelling. How many times did we check if filet has one L or two? All these different things. And we found out that the chefs in the kitchen were fantastic, but a lot of times they couldn't spell. So we always had to, to double check that. And I think the hard part was knowing that we had to get everything perfect. We could not make a mistake. If there was a mistake on something like that, it would be on the front page. So that was the hardest thing, I think, to be able to work quickly, but also with no mistakes. So once we got through that, but like I said, from day to day, you go in, and I had an hour and a half commute. You kind of sludge in and you work and you sludge back. But every now and then you get a special moment, that sticks with you. And I'm very, very grateful for that.
How is the work archived? You mentioned some people would take the work home and frame it. Did most people take the work home? And is the First Lady or Presidential Library archiving those menus and materials, or is it saved somewhere else?
Well, the guests are the ones who took the work home, but all of our work was saved in triplicates. Every single thing we produced was saved in triplicates. So in our office, we have a gray box archives and a gray archival box where everything is saved. And we have records going back to Truman in those boxes. We also had one set that we kept for reference, and meaning we had like a library, so that I made a binder of every single event every single year, had a binder, which as a reference, when the new administration would come in, they would want to know, okay, what did the Congressional Picnic look like 2 years ago, or what did Medal of Freedom look like 3 years ago? And so all that information was there. And then we always had a fourth box that was extras that we could lend out And if we didn't get it back, we would still have our backup reference libraries. So they were more like working copies. Um, if they are, we have been told they're in the presidential libraries has some copies of these things, but mostly the collection is held at the White House. And the other thing is that a lot of the events were not, they were privately. So Cooper Hewitt would come and do an arts festival, but that would be billed to Cooper Hewitt. It wasn't a taxpayer funded event. A lot of them were funded by other sources. And so technically, that information doesn't belong to the White House. So we had to be very careful about how we dispersed these documents. Not a lot of it is public. Um, the state dinner invitations all were public, and that's why I feel I can show
Mm.
that to you. Um, the garden seed packet, of course, was on TV, but there's a lot that was not. So I think that's why the presidential libraries do have some of this material.
So were they always very traditional state dinner events, or were there invitations to birthday parties for Sasha and Malia or other personal events that you worked on too? What was that like?
Well, we didn't get involved with personal events. That line between government employees was pretty strictly adhered to. But there were events, a lot more events, really more of the fun nature. There was one where we actually did an invitation. Barney, if you remember President Bush's dog, Barney had an event and he invited the winner of the, is it the Westminster Kennel Club, the show, the winner of that dog, he invited him. And so we did an event for him with a very casual kind of look. Of course, congressional picnics were a lot more casual. We did a state dinner for kids that was sponsored by Epicurious. And that was a lot of fun because everything was kid oriented. The colors, we did menus, and everything was brightly colored. We did book events, Dr. Seuss. We had Dr. Seuss come in and designed a lot of material for him. So the personalities of all these events really ran the gamut from just casual barbecues. The presidents oftentimes would entertain at Camp David, and so Camp David is rustic. I was fortunate. I was taken there once, and it's old cabins, and it's in the woods. It's a campground, and so we've done menus for that where we just had burgers and ice cream. We still had a menu, but it was a very not fancy at all, just very succinct, fun burgers and ice cream on that menu. So yeah, definitely a lot of different personalities. And that was the fun of it for us, being designers. We just love to kind of come up with great ideas to capture this mood of the event, in an artistic way. So that was the fun of it.
As you looked back through the archives, were there first ladies who really caught your attention as far as their calligraphy style or their menu style or invitations?
Well, you have to look at it like any client is going to have their own likes and dislikes. And with the First Lady, there's no exception. They all have individual personalities. They're all, of course, guided by protocol and the fact that these are White House events. So there's a certain elegance and look to something that's produced at the White House. But they had very unique approaches to entertaining. So Mrs. Bush, being a librarian, was very intrigued with fonts and calligraphy hands and lettering. And I also worked with her on a tour book. Well, every administration, I produced a 16-page tour book for Christmas. And I noted that when I was working with her, she was very interested in the fonts. Being a reading teacher, it just kind of made sense. Michelle Obama was very graphic. her approach to design was fresh, more minimalistic, great fun for us because we had a chance to kind of explore a world, more graphic nature. Not all calligraphy, calligraphy wasn't used in everything. There were challenges with producing an event invitation to capture the event, which might not calligraphy might not be the right choice. But I enjoyed working on those projects with her. And Mrs. Trump had such an elegance and grace about her, and such an air of color. But if you think of her background, being in fashion, she knew color, she knew texture. All of these things came into play when she was, working on an event. And they really mostly got hands-on with state donors. The smaller events, the staff ran by, of course, needed her approval. But I think the attention was different, the focus was different, based on the event. But that was the fun part of it for us, was trying to satisfy their needs, and kind of capture their vision of what the event was going to be.
So I have two more kind of logistical questions and
Mhm.
then one big question to wrap things up because we have gone way over
I
tonight. We've
know,
had
I'm
so
sorry.
many questions. This has been such a wonderful time, and I really appreciate you spending this much time with us, Pat. So, how many people worked in the office? And what was the lead time that you had on developing all of these pieces and parts?
There were 3 full-time calligraphers, and then one person who did data collection and management. She'd be the one to collect all the names, check the spellings, and give that to us to write out the place cards. So it was 3 full-time. Depending on the time of year, Christmas, we were overloaded. Summer was a little slower as people take vacations, but we were pretty busy. The lead time was usually sufficient, usually being the key word there, because one thing we noticed, that when you're an artist and need to come up with creative solutions, sometimes you have to kind of think about it a little while. It's not so easy to come up with solutions. So there was always a plea, give us enough time to come up with something that you particularly like. And the fact that there were 3 of us was helpful, because this way we can put our minds together. I used to do something called visual brainstorming. Like, if the first lady said, okay, we're doing a music event, can you send me 5 invitation designs when I'm back in town on Thursday and it's Tuesday? you know 5 different and designs, meaning almost final, not a sketch, but almost final. So that's a tall order. So we would do visual brainstorming, and the 3 of us, I would say, okay, everyone give me 3. And then 24 hours later, we'd go through them and we'd choose the best ones and submit those to the first lady. And so we weren't coming to any decisions as far as design. We were just giving her some thoughts, food for thought. So she could take that and say, oh, yes, you got it. This is it. Or, well, let's go in this direction. So that helped a lot, not having the final product right away, but being able to work it through.
So, the final question we have for you tonight comes from Facebook,
Mhm.
um, and it's kind of thoughtful and fun. How do you think a first gentleman would change the role of this calligraphy invitation place card experience in the White House?
Now this is total guess. I don't think it would change much at all. Um, we worked Yes, we worked with the first lady, and I've been using her as a source of our inspiration. But um really, to, compared to the contact we had with the staff, hers was much less. Our day-to-day contact was with the staff. We would get her input, but it wouldn't be a daily. The staff was there all the time, and so he's going to have a staff as well. The staff is really our first clue, and the staff really handles all the logistics of the events, all the nitty gritty of the events. So I'm not really sure the gender of the person who's overseeing the events is I don't really think it's going to matter so much. I mean, totally a guess, but knowing the workings and everything is very collaborative. It's just not one person calling the shot. Everything is a team effort. So I would think his team, the staff there, as well as West Wing staff, because West Wing also participates in decisions about West Wing events. So all of the lunches I mentioned before with the heads of state, all of those type of events are very West Wing driven. And in the past, a lot of that was led by men over there, but yet the outcome, was similar. So I imagine things are going to run, as they have always run as far as the decision making and the design decisions process.
Well, Pat, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us this evening.
You're
This has
welcome.
been so wonderful. It has been amazing to see the thoughts and ideas behind these place cards and menus. I will never look at a red solo cup the same way again. So thank you, Pat Blair. I
You're
would
welcome.
encourage people to go to Pat's website, patblaircalligraphy.com. This talk tonight will be available to people via the National First Ladies Library Facebook page and YouTube. And I want to encourage people to check out some of our future events and connect up with us. So thank you so much, Pat. This has been really, really wonderful.
Good. I'm very glad. I appreciate the invitation. I love talking about this work. It was special to me, special part of my life, and it's just special. White House, this is our government. This is how we show ourselves to the world. And I think it's proud for me to be able to be a part of that. So thank you for letting me talk about it.
Thank you so much and stay healthy, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we hope to see you either in person or virtually at our next program in the near future. Best wishes, everyone.